Hello, I'm Graham, and this video is about seeds and growth. More specifically, what causes seeds to grow. I'm sure many of you found yourself in a garden, and maybe you've been given some seeds. Thank you, Morrison's, for the very useful prop. And taken a step back and marvelled at the wonder that if you take just a small seed and put it in a pot or plant it out in your garden, and just give it some water and some sunshine, and after some time you will have a plant or a flower. Absolutely incredible. Still blows my mind that just happens every day all over the world. And even though science has told us so much about how that process actually works, it still struggles to explain why it happens all the time, given the right conditions. It's funny, we use similar imagery when we talk about building God's kingdom on earth. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the idea of planting seeds, and we spend a lot of time trying to plant those seeds, either building relationships or putting ourselves out into uncomfortable non-Christian situations. Or perhaps we try and create the right activities, the right events, just to put those conditions in place so that these seeds can start to grow. Often we can feel a little bit disappointed, maybe, that we are not seeing the fruit that we're expecting. We might feel that we're a little bit small, perhaps, and actually we're not doing as much as we think we should be doing with the skills and the abilities that God's given us. But actually, sometimes all we need is a bit of refreshment. Sometimes we need a bit of sprinkling, whether that's just a conversation with a friend, with a colleague, or perhaps some time with the Bible or a quick prayer. Sometimes that's all enough it needs to actually refresh us and remind us that we don't control the growth. The growth just happens by itself. In fact, we can't really explain it most of the time about how that growth actually happens. It's only when we give ourselves to God, give our plans to God and to His promises, and keep taking those steps that actually we see the magic happen and things start to grow and start to bloom. So I would really very much encourage you all to take that step back once in a while to look at what actually God is doing in all of our lives. And when we do entrust that, when we do surrender our own desires and our own plans to God, it's amazing how often they succeed, and so much more comes from them. In fact, more than we ever thought possible. Over time, if we keep doing that during our lives, we will see so much growth that eventually we'll end up with a lot more than what we started with. Now, the positive news for me is that actually this has been going on since the days of the early church. In fact, the reading today we're going to go through in a minute talks about the church in Corinth and how there, even in those early days, not many years after Pentecost really, the church was starting to grow, and already they'd found themselves in different groups that were arguing, groups that were originally following on with Paul, who started that church. But then there was other groups who were following other leaders like Apollos, who was actually a very creative and passionate leader who was teaching them and leading the church at that time. But Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, had to remind them that actually, ultimately, it's neither of them that is making the church grow. It is God. That's who is there, His Holy Spirit. And you can see that whenever you look around, that actually it's not about us. It's not about what we're doing and how much effort we're putting into. It's what we are putting inside of us. And it is really the Holy Spirit inside of all of us and God's power in us. We are His hands and feet on this earth, and that's what makes things grow. That's what eventually brings that blooming and that beautiful creation from all of those seeds that we'll be planting. Let's listen to the reading. (1 Corinthians 3, verses 5 to 9). What, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants, through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their own labour. For we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. So there you have it. It's not us, it's God that brings the growth. It's His power, His Holy Spirit, that living water that refreshes us, keeps us going, and ultimately turns those seeds into flowers and brings that whole amazing amount of beauty and colour that is God's kingdom on earth. So next time you're feeling like you can't carry on, that the circumstances around us are just too challenging, then don't be too discouraged. Go and find someone to talk to, maybe a friend or a colleague. Spend some more time in the Bible and spend some time in prayer, asking for more of God's Holy Spirit, because you never know quite what God might actually be growing in you and through you within our church. Thanks very much for watching.